We've been talking about the situation in Seattle where we had, I like to call them domestic terrorists, but Antifa, Black Lives Matter people took over a small segment of the city of Seattle and simply were trying to declare it as an autonomous zone, a zone they own, they control. Autonomous zone being language actually very significant in the Antifa extreme communist movement that is now taking hold in America. Autonomous zone, the name chosen by them for a reason that it signifies their connection to the extreme danger of this communist movement. But in Seattle, finally, we had the Seattle mayor finally decide, you know what, this isn't this the greatest idea after all. So she today ordered to clear out the encampment, the zone taken over by the Antifa terrorists. I have two clips to show you. One is clip one. Matt has that. So you see, first of all, they had actually set up a little community. It isn't just a few people in this Chaz Chop area of Seattle who were, blocking off a few streets. They tried to make it a real community, tried to really be in charge, tried to find people who live in the community for not doing what they said, set up little shopping areas, little vendor type things. So the first clip we just saw, police moving in, and you can see how many police is taking to overtake this area in Seattle. We also have clip two. Matt can show you that.
Okay, don't talk to us, please. We're moving here.
Straight, Pepper, watch your eyes.
Go left, go left.
I cut out of that, just so you know, I cut out of that. It was a very lengthy clip that I could have showed you today. There were a lot of the protesters. You saw, first of all, how many police it took. Second of all, how these protesters, and I don't even want to call them protesters. Protesting is a legitimate First Amendment activity. When you follow the law, you march in a certain area you've been permitted to march in, you carry your signs, you have speeches. These are simply terrorists taking over segments of America. But as the police arrived, it took literally, as you see, dozens of police to even clear one street, and there was one of the protesters, one of the rioters, one of the communist Antifa people bellowing, yelling. He was filming the police at the same time yelling, F-bombs flying, very foul language, yelling at the police, essentially trying to tell them to go away, that they shouldn't be there. The police had to be, as you can see, they had not locked arms, very close, en masse, marching down the street. You have a lot of the protesters challenging them, yelling at them, telling them, you go away, I want to see your badge number, all these idiotic things. And I want to say, the reason I wanted to share this in the first five today is this. It was bad enough that it took the Seattle mayor, whatever it has been, weeks to close out this encampment, this intrusion into a otherwise sovereign area, an area of America in Seattle, which does not belong to them. It's bad enough it took her that long, but what you saw in the conduct of those people, the Antifa, Black Lives Matter terrorists who took over that area, is defiance. You didn't see any sense of them saying, okay, well, we were trying to make a political point and we just overstayed our welcome a little too long, just trying to make a point that we demand X, we want Y. None of that. These people are serious. You've got to understand this about the Antifa movement in this country. It is not simply a few wild-haired, long-haired, irresponsible young people. It is a mindset. It is a movement rooted in, if you watched the show a few weeks ago, we had a fabulous guest explaining, Kyle Scheidler, explaining the depth of thinking in the Antifa movement, how it's been around since Hitler's days. It is a communist movement. It is a terrorist, fascist movement, and it has taken hold in America. So finally, in Seattle, you had it cleaned out by the mayor, and actually it appears only this mayor took action, this Democrat mayor in Seattle took action, because they began to have actual crime, as in murders, killing people inside the zone. Still, these communist rioters were not going to let the police in, did not want to let anyone in to help, even after people were being murdered. You have police reporting there are rapes occurring, rapes inside this area, and we can't get in response to calls because Antifa said we can't come there. So this whole idea, folks, that we're beginning a summer of unrest, or maybe we're in the middle of a summer of unrest, is not unrest as usual. It is not the same thing as protests in other times in America where you had people rising up protesting for or against something. This is a very dangerous movement in this country. Antifa is locked with the Black Lives Matter movement. Not every single person who is participating in Black Lives Matter protests is part of Antifa, but the organization itself, BLM, Black Lives Matter, run by Marxists with a Marxist agenda, the takeover of America, the destruction of America, signs put out that outside for the public to see outside that Chaz area in Seattle included things like there's definitely hatred of Jews. There's also advocacy to end capitalism, to bring socialism or communism, to denounce capitalism as the reason for racism in this country. Is idiotic, no logic to them at all, but everything this Antifa group was talking about, far bigger than the horrible death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. It is a movement to change and take over America. Finally, the Seattle mayor ordered the police and they finally took over. They, by the way, had a similar thing in Portland. Last night, the police had to move in Portland area to clear out a crowd that was trying to replicate. They've been trying for several days now, but last night was kind of a big blow up. The people in Portland, Antifa types, had also decided they were going to take over some segment of Portland, and the police greeted their presence with tear gas. I don't think anyone was killed. They certainly had some injuries and scuffles, but they had the people of Portland apparently learning a lesson from the people of Seattle. But I raise all this to say, and I'm going to close out the first five by saying this. This country has always had, for decades, maybe since our founding, but certainly for decades, extreme anti-American elements inside our country, anti-American elements who simply do not believe in the idea of America as founded, do not believe in the idea of America as founded. Communists in this country since the 1920s, the communist movement we're talking about in this show several times, figured out early on they could not convince the American people living in abundance, prosperity, and freedom how great it would be to convert to socialism and communism. So the communists figured out early on they couldn't convince us with the truth because Americans can see how ugly and undesirable socialism and communism were. And they were saying, no, communist movement decided, okay, we got to take the race angle. We're going to play the race card. We're going to race bait. We're going to claim that our violence in the city streets is not anything about communism or socialism. We're just trying to stand up for racial justice. There was a brilliant book written by a black man in America who joined the communist movement in, I don't even know what years it was, 1920s, 1930s, thought that the communist movement had come to save the black people of America, and soon realized the communists, the socialists, the Antifa people, the predecessors to Antifa, they're just using race as an issue to divide America and is not at all helpful to America. I'm going to wrap up the first five by saying this. There have been anti-American elements in this country for decades. Another anti-American element, another element determined to bring about the destruction of America, has been the element of Islam, radical Islam in America. And that brings me to introducing our next guest. So at the end of the first five, I'm saying, folks, please see these, what we're watching in the streets, the disruption in America, the destruction of property, the arson, the murders. Please see it in the bigger context of an attack on the very idea of America as founded. And this, my very fine friends, is today's First Five.